Welcome to This Is My Story, where everyday women share their stories of struggles and setbacks that have shaped their lives. I'm your host, Melissa Touch. Today, I'm chatting with Jessi Caldwell, my sister-in-law. Jessi wears many hats. She's a devoted wife, a nurturing mother, and a corporate learning executive. At just 8 months old, Jessi's life took a profound turn as she found her forever home through adoption. At 16, the sudden loss of her mother reshaped the landscape of her world. But Jessi, being the resilient soul she is, pressed on. In the chapters of her life that followed, Jessi tied the knot and welcomed 3 beautiful children into her life, including a nonverbal autistic son. Her story is a testament to the twists and turns life throws at us, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Before we jump into today's episode, don't forget to follow us on our social media and subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find all our social media links as well as more information about us at thisismystorypodcast.com.
My name is Jessi Caldwell, and this is my story.
Every time we've been together, we've always had either my kids or your kids at some point all over us, all in the way. So we've never really gotten to have, a long conversation about some of this stuff. So nice to get to chat with you as have an actual adult conversation without kids around.
Look at us. It took us 10 years. But we're here.
Yeah. Yes. So we're going to jump right in. First thing, you were adopted at 8 months old. So can you share your story of adoption with me?
Absolutely. So, it's pretty straightforward. I was just a little itty bitty baby. My mom and dad wanted to have more kids, but they weren't able to for, health reasons. And, my family, my mom and dad, I should say my adoptive mom and dad, they were older. So my mom was 48, 49 when they adopted me. And my dad is just a little bit younger than her. So, I have my brother and my sister, and my biological uncle worked for my dad's oil and gas company. And his wife's, his wife's sister is my biological mother. So I don't know if it's like my first aunt and uncle or like a, second aunt and uncle, but they knew mom and dad wanted to have little ones, at least another one, and they weren't able to. And they knew that my biological mother, she was 19 when she gave birth to me. So she was a teen mom and was not really able to give me the type of life that, she wanted for her kiddo. And they did all that fun stuff in the background and got the lawyers involved and did a private adoption. And my dad was actually away at business trip. He was up in Maine doing some lobster fishing with some clients they were trying to close a deal with. And he got the call after being there, not even a full day, that the paperwork and stuff went through early and time to pick Jessi up. So he made a beeline back to West Virginia to get me. So, yeah, I think I've known since the day I was old enough to really comprehend anything that I was adopted. My mom and dad used to always tell me that they got to hand choose me, that all these other kids, their parents got stuck with them, but they got to pick me out, which I thought was pretty cool. So I've known from the beginning that I was adopted.
Obviously, you know who your biological parents were because of the close tie with them. Did you actually interact with them any growing up, or actually know that's who they were, or did you find that out later as an adult?
I found that out in my adult years. So, for example, I didn't know that the folks that were my biological aunt and uncle were my biological aunt and uncle, that we didn't really talk about it. My biological mother, I've never met her in person. I know who she is, and I know, bits and pieces of her story. My biological father passed away probably about a decade ago from cancer, but they were never together. He was a lot older than her, which is kind of creepy if you really think about it, because he was almost 10 years her senior. So I knew about them, in my much older adult years, but I didn't know anything about them during the time I was, my formative years growing up, high school, any of that stuff.
So I know that adoptive children can often struggle with feeling unwanted or just with a self-identity because they don't have anybody that looks like them, or they don't really have a grasp on their history, or they struggle with self-worth sometimes, even though I know your parents sounds like from the get-go that wasn't an issue because they were like, we got to choose you. But did you ever struggle with your identity and your sense of worth or belonging during your formative years?
I would say for sure, especially around those teen years, you're growing up and you're starting to realize as you are maturing that, the whole nature versus nurture comes into play, and really learning about why you are the way that you are, why you look the way you do, why as a teenager, why you getting acne. And it's just these little things, nuances. And you don't have anyone that you can be like, oh, well, mom did that. Mom had that. Or, oh, my siblings, they had that. So that's just our DNA. That's how we're made up. So I didn't have that. And I don't think I realized that it impacted me in those formative years until I was a mom. That's when I think the realization hit me that it did impact me maybe a lot more than I thought. I always was enamored with who looks like what parent. And I know I've said that when I met all of you guys for the first time. I was like, oh, Chad, you look like this one. And oh my gosh, Melissa just looks like this one. And I just thought that was so cool because I'd never seen that. That wasn't normal for me. So my first blood relative was my daughter, Janie, who looked exactly like me.
She is a spitting image of you. Yes.
Yes. So isn't Wimberly. And Corbin's got a little bit more of Chad.
Mm-hmm.
You can definitely tell who their mama is for sure. So I think looking back on it, there was a lot of, am I wanted? I don't fit. I jokingly say that you could tell who did not fit in the puzzle on family photos because all of my family are like super dark complected, dark hair, very, and then you have me who I'm super pale, bright white blonde hair. So which one obviously was not the right
milkman delivered.
The milkman did. So I definitely think that it had a lot to do with, I don't know if it's so much feeling wanted, but I think I had attachment issues. And I think it also goes into, when I lost my adoptive mom too. I think that all kind of plays into that. Am I wanted? And everybody leaves and why don't they stay? And so that was really something that I had to work through as I got older.
So before we get into the loss of your mother, like you said, you have children of your own now. They're your first blood relatives. 2 of the 3 look exactly like you. I know when Janie was born, that was like just a thrill to be like, yeah. I can see myself in her. Somebody looks like me finally.
Yep.
But how has that experience of adoption influenced how you parent?
I think making sure that the kiddos know that, I had my mom always saying, oh, well, we handpicked you. And the other kids got stuck with you. I think it was almost on the opposite side of, we wanted to have you and we tried to have you, and letting them know that they're loved and they're important and that there's a bond between like Janie and I. I mean, with all 3 of them, but, her being my firstborn too, I still think there's that little bit of a bond, becoming a first time mom with her. And I just think really being able to let her know that I see myself in you, but I also know that you're so much more than just my DNA and looking like me. There's so many things that you can do. And I just can't wait to be that annoying, nagging mom that I didn't get to have going through college and, getting to plan a wedding with and do all that fun stuff. So I definitely think I cling to them a little bit more than maybe I would have if I had a quote unquote normal childhood and was, brought up with my same biological family. I think I just hold a little special part of it more dear to my heart because I went through it under a different lens than most people.
Yeah. So when you were 16, your mother died suddenly and unexpectedly. Can you take me back to that day?
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a tough one. Gosh, it was spring break. So we had gone out to dinner and grocery shopping, I remember, the evening before because a really bad snowstorm was supposed to move in. This is March in West Virginia, so that's pretty normal to have a crazy snowstorm to hit around that time frame. So I know that we had all gone out to eat and we did our grocery shopping and stuff. And on the way home, I remember she held my hand. I'm a 16-year-old girl, so I think I was getting to that point where when you're that teenage stage and your mom is super annoying or way more than your parents do. And I think I was just at that stage. And I'm like, wow, what is she holding my hand for? And I remember her looking at me. She said, I just want you to know that mom loves you. And I pray every day that I get to grow up and see you walk across that stage. And it was just such a random comment. And I think back to it now. I'm like, gosh, where'd that come from? So the next day, it was wee hours of the morning, my sister, Rita, had come and she woke me up. And it was, Rita and Kevin lived on the other side of town. So there was no need for them to be there. So I was like, why are you guys here? And she had said, Dad called me. Mom's been very sick all night, really bad headache. I don't know what's going on, but I'm trying to talk her into going to the emergency room, but I just wanted to wake you up. So if you see, hey, our car's in the driveway, you're not scared and think something's going on. And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't think anything of it. And I went back to sleep. And shortly thereafter, the next memory I had was, I don't remember if it was my sister or my brother-in-law yelling up the stairs for me. So I went running down the stairs and Rita was in the bedroom. Mom was having convulsions, a seizure, and we had no idea what was going on. So safe to say, it didn't get better. And she said, we called the ambulance. Can you run outside and flag them down? And I remember grabbing my coat and running out. And during that time, that snowstorm moved in that night. So we had almost like a foot of snow that had come in. So I remember flagging the ambulance down. And they went back to the bedroom downstairs when they came and put mom on the gurney. And I guess the only time from my conversation with my sister that mom was coherent was when they were rolling her past me. And she came to and said, where's Jessi? Is she okay? And I'm like, Mom, I'm right here. So I didn't see all of the things that my poor sister had to see. So she was coherent in that moment for me. So I was cautiously optimistic that everything was going to be fine. And then we've got to, at that time, it was United Hospital Center here, which I know you're not familiar with this area, but it was what they call the old UHC. They had an old hospital where they have a brand new fancy one now up kind of closer to Bridgeport. So they had us there. And of course, even still to this day, I'm pretty sure there's like no neurologist there at that small city hospital. There was nothing they could do for her. And unfortunately, it was snowing so bad that they couldn't life flight her. So they ended up having to take her in an ambulance. And we went up to Morgantown to what was called Ruby Memorial at that time. And we were there all day, like first thing in the morning and then evening time. I don't remember an awful lot. I think maybe shock and being so young. I tried to blank some of it out, but I do remember them taking us back a couple times to that dreaded privacy room where the doctor comes in and, they had tried to do brain surgery on her. She had a brain aneurysm. And they said there's nothing, even if we would have brought her in the evening before, that it was in such a place behind her brain stem going down, like close to where her spinal cord was, nobody would be able to have saved her. Nobody would have been able to see it, the imaging they had then. They tried to do surgery. It didn't work. And they said, it was just a matter of time. She had a DNR and, mom would not want to have lived and been a vegetable. She was not, even though she was an older mom compared to, my peers' moms, she was still a little go-getter. So she would not wanted to live in a state where she could not be, able to communicate and be cognizant. We went back and everybody said goodbye. My brother was there, my dad and sister, and everybody said, their final goodbyes. And I stood off to the very end. I didn't know if I wanted to hug her. I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was just, it was a lot. And that's a lot for anybody to process, let alone a 16-year-old kid, right? And I gave her a hug and I don't know, just like, she kept holding on, like she did when they put the gurney passes, where's my baby? Where's Jessi at? Is she okay? She took her last breath when I gave her a hug. So she held on. That's for sure. So it was tough. A lot of firsts that you had to go through as an adult, a young adult. Golly, I'm ugly crying on you.
You're going to make me cry. I brought some tissue just in case because I was like, this is going to be a sad story.
Yeah, no. So, a lot of first that you have to go through, I raised myself for a lot of it, and I say that cautiously so. My sister is 10 years older than me. My brother's 27 years older than I am. So, my brother, he had a family at that point in time and he wasn't around. And my sister was, 26 years old and was suddenly a mom, I guess, in the sense that she felt an obligation to be there and to kind of raise me. And, I am super thankful to her and Kevin for that. They didn't have to, but they did. So, and then my mom's sister, Aunt Jean Gerard, she is a couple years older than mom. She's still living. That woman is spry. I hope when I'm in my late 80s one day, if the Lord lets me live that long, I am that chipper and ornery and spry. But that woman lived an hour away and she didn't miss a thing. She came to the competition. She came to the, academic events and anything that mom would have been there for, that woman was there. I lost a mom and that was tough, but she didn't leave me alone. And I think that really helped those tough moments and those tough years because I had a heck of a strong group of women that she left rallying around me. So with that being said, I think that also has a lot to do with why I am the way that I am. Always afraid everybody leaves and, you have those attachment issues. And I've had to work through a lot of anxiety and a lot of therapy. I have had a lot of therapy. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with making sure that you are on top of your mental health and wellness and being self-aware to know that there's triggers and the underlying causes for those triggers, but also to recognize that even though bad things happen, that the Lord does put other people and things in your life for a reason. And they might not, make up for it, right? But they're definitely there to help guide you. And I had, my sister and I had my Aunt Jean and I couldn't imagine having gone through and done life without either one of them.
What was the grief process like for you as a 16-year-old? I mean, obviously you were surrounded by people who showed up and were being there and supporting you and loving on you. But for yourself, what does that look like for a 16-year-old?
Oh gosh, it wasn't good. It was tough. I honestly think I for the next couple of years, I really struggled with depression and my anxiety went into overdrive and I kind of closed myself up. I was super bubbly on the outside. Nobody would have ever known anything was ever wrong with me. My dad, he worked and he had to work through his own grief, right? So he wasn't there. So I had to work through a lot of this stuff living by myself, doing life as a 16-year-old that's now suddenly an adult, right? I had to get myself up for school in the mornings and get ready and go do life and not have the same layout as my peers, right? So I didn't have a chance for a long time, I think, to really process it. And my senior year of high school, I know that it really kind of was the melting and tipping point, so to speak. I was going to school the first part of the day and the last half of the day because I could have graduated early, but at that time, way back, oh my goodness, like over 2 decades ago now, I'm aging myself. You couldn't really graduate early, so you just wrapped up early and I went to work. And I remember I worked the Dairy Queen all through high school and all through college, and I was off. It was May, so we graduated the end of May, and back then the seniors had like 2 weeks where we didn't even go in at all for the first half of the day. You just showed up a couple of days for practice, for graduation, then you were done. So during that 2-week time, I remember I happened to have a day off, and I tried to work as much as I could because Dad was gone. He was working. And then in evenings, he was, going out to his sisters, my other Aunt Jean Powell. He would go out there and visit her because she had just lost her husband. And, they both kind of lean on each other. And then, my sister had her husband and my brother had his wife at the time. So, I didn't have anybody. And I think at that moment, I'm sitting there in the house where everything happened, where, I'm getting ready to graduate and go to college. And I think everything just kind of hit me all at once. And I tried to commit suicide. And I won't go into the details in the story, but I am still here. Praise God, it did not work. And he had a bigger story for me to tell. So the best advice I can give anybody, whether it's you going through grief or, a family member or a friend that you see going through grief, get that person into a psychologist, a therapist. They need to talk with somebody. They need to figure out how to process all of these things that they're feeling and these questions and, the anger. And we've got to figure all this stuff out. And really, I probably should have been in therapy before that it all happened, being adopted, right? You don't think, you think the situation that you're in is perfect and then you don't have to talk through it. But when you're young and you're going through all these things and there's not that person that looks like you, right? And then you lose that one person that wanted you more than anybody in the world, right? And you've got all these things you're trying to figure out and you're only 16 years old, man. Like 16, 18 years old, you're not an adult by any stretch of the imagination. We don't know everything at that age. Trust me, I thought I did. I did not. So make sure that you help people seek out help. That's not a weakness, actually quite the opposite.
What are some cherished memories or lessons that your mom taught you that you carry with you today?
Oh, wow. I wish I had more examples of this to give you because I was very young. I would say that the biggest thing that mom instilled in all of us girls is do better than me. And, my mom was amazing. My mom had a career before she had kids. She worked at a bank and then she worked at a doctor's office. And, but my dad did very well for himself in the oil and gas business and she didn't have to work and she was a stay-at-home mom. And I think that's awesome. But I also know that it was very important for her. Her and dad had put away for my college and it was paid for and ready to roll even before she passed away. And she instilled in all of us girls to do better and do things differently than she did. So I know from conversations with my father that, mom knew and had told him that I wasn't going to be staying in West Virginia. She probably would be super shocked that I'm back here right now, even though we're probably not staying here because it's not the best for Corbin's education. But she wanted me to go and do bigger and better things. And she wanted the same for Rita. And Rita has gone out and killed it. And, I've like to think that I've done pretty okay. And so I think, and being tough, that was another thing. My mom had a lot of attributes very much like your mom. If you're not bleeding, you're not dying, you're fine. Get up. And, I saw a meme once that said, I was 5 years old and I died once. And my mom, said, you're not bleeding and get back up and get to it. So that's very much, that was my mom. She was tough. And she also wanted me to be tough, meaning, don't take crap from anybody and stand up for yourself, but do what's right. And I think that that's just been the way I've kind of lived. I don't have a lot of memories with her. I was normally shooed out of the kitchen because I was nicknamed Messy Jessi for a reason. So I was always kicked out because I was making messes. We did a lot of vacationing. We went to the beach and stuff as a kid or camping. I have those memories, but I wish I had some more things that I've learned from her that I could share with my girls and pass on to them. I don't have that, but I have the next best thing, and I have my Aunt Jean Gerard. So I was able to learn a lot from her that I can pass on to my kiddos. So
that's sweet. Before we move on, you just describing that grief process leading up to wanting to commit suicide or the suicide attempt. Your path could have looked way different.
Oh, yeah.
And you ended up taking a fairly traditional path. Like, you didn't end up in jail. You didn't end up a drug addict.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to? Like, what led you to be who you are today? To come out as fairly normal, which I hate the word normal. I say that all the time. I hate that word because nobody's normal. But, what led you to not take to those paths to addiction or to some other way of numbing the pain?
Well, first and foremost, my faith in Jesus and being a Christian. I did grow up in a Baptist household my entire life. From the moment they got me, I remember like the next day I had my dedication to the Lord, and they had the thing at the church, and I have all those pictures. And so I think that obviously, not that I think, I know that obviously had a huge impact in where I'm at now. Another thing, I mean, I didn't get to where I am without any bumps or bruises in the road. I did have a problem with alcohol when I was in college, and I really had to get that out of my system. And because I was sheltered, right? So I definitely think that had a big play in it. I was very sheltered, so I wasn't without bumps and bruises in the road and the learning curves. But I also had in the back of my mind the little bit I did know about my biological mother and father and family was they had always dealt with some type of addiction, whether it was alcohol or drugs, and there was it wasn't the best dynamic and DNA happening. And I think always being scared to end up as a statistic. And I wanted to, obviously, I had the goal to be able to show my mom up in heaven, she was looking down on me, that I'm making you proud, right? So I think it was a culmination of a lot of different things.
So you grew up and married my brother.
I did, my little handsome hubby man.
And you guys have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. The Corbin's in the middle. He's the boy. And he is nonverbal autistic.
Yes, my Mr. Sweet Face.
When did you first realize, I think something is different here?
Yeah. Pretty early on. So I'm wanting to say he was just a little over a year. We're close to that 18-month mark. And he was not hitting those milestones that the other kids his age hit. And I didn't have a very good thing to look back on with Janie, because see, Janie was developmentally delayed with her speech. So she was in speech therapy from the time she was 2 on, and then to right around 5 years old. So the beginning of kindergarten, then she tested out of it. So I didn't have a lot of things to go off of. Oh, well, your sister did this at this age. But I know from filling out those forms at the pediatrician's office that ask, is he doing A, B, and C? And I just remember on an appointment, I'm going, nope, no, like we're not having any words. We're babbling a little bit, but nothing coherent. At that point in time, Chad and I had talked about it, and he had said, oh, well, I think he'll be fine. Janie was developmentally delayed with her speech, and, I was too, and that might be all that it is. And I said, well, let's ask somebody. So we started at the pediatrician's office, and then because he was under the age of 3, throughout the U.S., you have what some places call it birth to 3, or early intervention is what some states call it. And they have folks that come out in every area of whatever state that you're in, and they will do an at-home evaluation. So they come out first, and they had a conversation with Chad and I, and finding out, let's learn a little bit more about Corbin. What is he not doing? What are your concerns? And then after that intake, they send out a slew of their therapists. So we had a psychologist that came. We had a speech therapist that came. We had a whole bunch. Like we had a team of 5 people, and they all stuck after they had the intervention. And at that point in time, they didn't say or think that it was autism. They said it could be, but it could just be a developmental delay. So we started doing some therapies, and we had weight belts and weight vests and weighted blankets and all of these things. And he never really started talking. He would mimic what we said, but so he was about 18 months when we knew something's not right with our little fella. I mean, he's just sweet and lovey as could be, but he's just not hitting those milestones. And then he wasn't thriving at daycare. We did have him in daycare. I think he lasted maybe 2 weeks, and he was just, he would rock on his knees back and forth in the corner. He was overstimulated. He would cry. He would do this an awfully lot. It wasn't a good fit. So we ended up pulling him out. And at that point in time is when I decided maybe I'll be a stay-at-home mom. So I went to be a stay-at-home mom and try to take care of him, and kept Janie home. And and he did his therapy, but he's just never spoken except for what they call echolalia, which is he says what we say.
How do you communicate with him?
So he can understand us plain as day. Like he doesn't have any, like I say this and I know it sounds bad, but of all three kids, and they're all bright, I mean, I still say to this day, Corbin is probably my smartest child because he's so inept, like he's so in tune, I mean, to emotions, and he can read the room way better than probably most adults can. Like he just knows if you're having a bad day, he's going to come and give you a hug and a kiss and curl up in your lap. He understands completely what you say. He just can't communicate it back. So we have done some sign language, like he can say more since he was little, like he wants more, or he's thirsty, or thank you, yes and no, like yes or no. But I would say largely we know him. We have that in tune communication where if he can't get it across what he's wanting, he'll just hold our hand and show us. So I've learned largely that certain babble sounds, like back when he was little, a bottle was baba. He could never say a bottle, but he was able to verbalize baba. So that's how that word and term came to be. So I wish I could say that it was some really cool creation of communication tools that we created to make it work, but it's just we know Bubba and he can communicate and give us a pretty good idea of what's happening and what he needs.
It sounds like, when they're young toddlers and they don't have a lot of words yet, but you as the mom, you pretty much, by the cry, you can tell what's going on with them, by the, the pointing or the grunting, or, you kind of just have this like sense of, I know what he needs or what he's wanting.
You got it. And the cool thing with Corbin is he is able to verbalize some things, and it's not echolalia. So because he has a vocabulary under 50 words, he's labeled as nonverbal, but don't let that fool you, because he knows how to say he says he's hungry. If he wants he calls it a chicken cheesy sandwich. He's not actually wanting a chicken sandwich. He just wants a cheese sandwich put in the microwave because he doesn't like it crunchy, because this is a texture thing. He could tell you when he could say Coke, plain as day. Pappy Roger, my dad, if you're listening to this, you did not hear me say that I'm giving the kids Coke. But no, he does. He can say Coke and milk, and so he can say the basics now, but not at the very beginning.
So how old is he now? We kind of just glazed right over that. Forgot to mention how old he is.
He is 7. So he is born in May. So he will be 8 here in what?
Next. Yeah. He's about 7.5. Yeah. And
so,
what grade is he in? Or is he considered in a grade, or how does that work?
Oh, yeah. So he's in 2nd grade, and he is in general ed, which is us neurotypical folks. That's our regular classroom. But us special ed parents know that gen ed means the regular classroom. He's in there for 60 to 70% of his day. And then the rest of the time, he's in his special ed classroom. And that classroom consists right now of approximately 9 kiddos, largely boys. So autism is an odd thing. It doesn't generally have a very large population of girls. It has some, but it, for whatever reason, generally tends to happen and occur in boys. So this is his first classroom. I think he has maybe 1 girl, but up until this point, every other classroom he's ever been in he's been in just all little dudes his age. And he's in there and they work on his math skills, and he has his speech therapist that'll come in and do one-on-one therapy with him in there. He also has music therapy that happens. So he has his music therapy that'll happen during his special ed time and his more like one-on-one. So those parts of the day in the gen ed classroom where it might be content, a curriculum that's a little bit over his head, that he's not going to grasp it like the neurotypical kiddos will, that's the time that he would be in his specials.
So I know autism spectrum disorders vary widely. And we already said that he's nonverbal. And you mentioned a little bit some sensory issues with him. So aside from being nonverbal and having some sensory issues with food, what are some of the other challenges he faces?
Yeah, there's a lot. I love this quote. Chad always says it. He saw it online, and it really is so true. Is if you know one autistic kid, you know one autistic kid. Like it's such a, when they use that term spectrum, that is honestly the best way to put it. There's, they have, high functioning and low functioning, and I quite frankly don't know if I necessarily fully believe in that, because Corbin would be put on that low functioning side of the house because he's nonverbal. But when you see how quickly he picks up on stuff, and he's just got that curious engineering mindset. So he likes to take things apart and he could put it back together too. A lot of kids could not do that. So it is such a broad spectrum, but I think there's still a lot of nuances that every autistic parent of a quote unquote low functioning child would say they all have. And the first thing is going to be educational opportunities for them. So not every state is created equal when it comes to special needs, especially for autistic children. They are not special needs like some other forms that's out there. Every single one of them is different. They learn differently. And it's very important to be able to get them into a place that also has therapy available that can help them. And then they can implement this into their classroom. And that's ABA therapy. A lot of folks, some people think, oh, it's so mean. I don't see that. I think the BCBAs that's worked with Corbin in the past have been amazing. They've been the opposite of mean, loving, open folks who they just push him. They pushed him to try to communicate and to learn and to do better and be better. But you don't have that here, for example, in West Virginia. We've been here. We came back shortly after the pandemic hit, and my career went 100% remote. And we thought it would be great to be close to, this side of the family up here. I know we've been down south for a long time. And we said, let's move up, because my kids are my dad's only grandchildren. So that'd be awesome to have that relationship for them. And we've been on the wait list for ABA therapy for a year and a half. So my son went from having it to not having it for a year and a half. And there's just nobody, like the state of West Virginia is just, everybody has a wait list. There's no autistic schools around. There's one in Weirton. He's been on that wait list since we came. I actually followed up with him a couple months ago, and they can't even tell me where he's at on the wait list because the wait list really hasn't even moved. It's sad. So that's a huge obstacle, is just making sure that the therapy is available and it's affordable, that, that you have waivers in place. And a lot of states have wait lists. There's West Virginia, they have what's called the Developmental Disability Waiver. So it's called IDD. And part of that waiver, we got on it, and it's based upon Corbin. It's not based upon us or our, financial information at all. So I'm glad that it takes it into consideration for him. And what it does is you have Medicaid that covers, a lot of his services, or so we thought. But the state of West Virginia does not cover ABA therapy, which is exactly what we needed it for. We thought that this would help, get him off that wait list for a year and a half, get him into ABA therapy. No, they don't cover it. So they cover speech therapy, they cover occupational therapy, and if you are not working, which doesn't apply to me, then they'll pay you to stay home and watch your kids, or you can use that to go for respite or to pay for somebody else to watch your special needs kids. But again, when you're in a small town, it's hard pressed to even find family that feels comfortable to watch Corbin, let alone, having to find a stranger and go through that background. So I think that's another huge one. And then, I can go on forever. So therapy and getting him the healthcare that he needs, that's a huge one. School, education, being able to do normal things like go to church as a family, that's kind of null and void here. I know a while back I had said something, I have reached out to so many churches around here, and I won't call out by name, but, I've reached out and communicated with them and said, hey, we're at that time, we're newer to the area. I have a son who's nonverbal autistic. He gets easily, sensory overload. Do you guys have any special classrooms that he could partake in so he can go to Sunday school and then we can go to church? And it was just, if they got back to us, it was no, sorry, we can't help you. If they got back to us, 9 times out of 10, you can just see where they've read the message and I'm just going to pray for her, but I'm not going to respond to her. So that was, that was something that was very frustrating. And I remember I put a post up on Facebook and was like, man, just these people, they want you to come to church, but they only want your neurotypical kids to come to church. They don't have anything out there for your special kiddos so they can come and they can worship. And just because he's nonverbal and he's easily overstimulated doesn't mean that this kid doesn't have a soul, doesn't mean that he doesn't have the wherewithal to know, Jesus, and then he came and died for our sins. And like, he's a smart kid. He learns differently than, maybe that kid over there or that kid over there. And it can be a lot, but we've got to have something in place. And a lot of folks said, oh, well, you can come to our church and you can come to our church. And first off, I loved that. I thought that was amazing. And it was so kind for them to offer that. But you tried to go to the church and there's nothing he's still going to get overstimulated. There's nothing in place for him to be able to, like, I don't know if somebody's like, oh, well, you can bring him and I can sit back and watch him. I'm like, but sweet. But there's so much more to it that I just want somebody to babysit my kid, right? I want him to have that environment to be able to learn and to worship and to be able to do it where he can comprehend it and he feels safe. So long story short, that is a battle. And I think we have to really be in a larger city, go back to a larger area. Like when we were in Dallas, there was some churches there that had autistic or sensory special rooms so the kiddos can go join and in on their kiddo worship and Bible study and Sunday schools and all that fun stuff. So I just think sometimes you don't get that in the small towns.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking about anywhere that I've lived. I don't think I've ever encountered a church that had anything for autistic children.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Yeah, we've only seen it in Nashville, Tennessee. When we were there was a church that we went to that had a special service for their sensory, they called them their sensory pals. And then down in Dallas, Texas, where we lived. So down south, which ironically always gets a pretty bad rap for autism services and special ed services altogether. And I will say that is not well earned, at least in our experience where we've been, because he's always had some of the best teachers and the best education. His hours were more than double than what he gets now. There's opportunities for him, splash pads, and there's zoos here doing all these, Boo with the Zoo, but they don't do anything like even do an early, 1 hour for those sensory babies to be able to do Boo with the Zoo with their families and stuff. But they don't think about that. That's not, that's not on their radar, but in those larger areas it is. And I just think sometimes, sadly, if you have the opportunity to be near those larger locations, then you need to do it, which is, we're back at that square now is, I could be anywhere, and because I work remote, Chad can be anywhere. So, we tried it, and unfortunately, it's just not the best situation here. So we're going to have to go back to a larger location where it's better for not just Corbin, but for the girls. They have more opportunities too, but you just come up with a lot of these situations that people don't think of for special kiddos.
I know when we come across kids that are nonverbal, or even anybody, not just kids, when you're coming across somebody who has a nonverbal disability, it's often hard to look past that disability because that's so obvious into who they are. So can you describe, what is Corbin like? What's his personality like? What is his interest?
Well, he is properly nicknamed my Mr. Sweetface. And truer words could not be spoken about that sweet boy. He is a little love bug, very smiley, happy baby. He's been like that since he's been a baby. He has one dimple on his right cheek, and he'll smile and flash his little dimple, and he'll give you hugs and kisses. He'll be playing like he was playing the other day, and he just gets up in the middle of his playtime, and he just puckers, goes, and does that kissy noise all the way across the living room to give hugs and kisses, and then he just goes back and finishes what he was doing. He's a nosy little dude. That is for sure. He likes to see what's going on, and it's always in the places he's not supposed to be. So going down into the basement and tearing into stuff in storage, but he will find it, and you can't hide anything from that kid. I mean, he's like MacGyver. He'll find a way to get whatever it is that he wants. He loves penguins. That is his happy thing. He has loved penguins for years. When we were down south, one of his teachers, Miss Driscoll, had given him, when we left, a stuffed penguin, and he was in pre-K then. So 3.5, 4 years old, he still has that penguin. It has to get a bath, so it gets washed every single week because he takes it with him everywhere. He sleeps with it. It goes to school with him. I mean, that boy is obsessed with that penguin and all things penguin. He is a love bug with his sisters unless they get on his nerves or they try to take the penguins, and then he can get a little aggressive and he will, push them a little bit, and then they get it real quick that is Bubby's and I cannot play with Bubby's toys. So he is, that's pretty normal for autistic kiddos. They have something that's theirs and they do not like to share. But otherwise, we've actually been pretty lucky with Corbin. He'll share. He likes to make new friends. So he's done through an autism group that's here. They have activities all the time for the kiddos. So we just finished swim lessons at the college up here, Fairmont State College, and their swim team did swim lessons for him. So that's another fun fact about Corbin is he loves water. That kid would be outside and in water all day, every day, if you would let him.
Wasn't there a house that you guys lived in that he broke out and got into their pool? They were in the pool, though, when he got in, right?
So Corbin was, I think, about 4 years old. And we had, their fence all the way around. But he apparently had figured out how to finagle the one door. Because we never put a padlock on that one side because you had to move this latch and you had to push it up and over and had to come back down just to get out. And it was pretty high. And I know Chad and I was like, oh, we don't need to put a padlock. I don't think he's going to be able to figure it out. We were wrong. We had a bad lapse in parental judgment. Padlock went up that next day, but he did. He got out. There was a pool party happening right next door. And he could see some way through those little itty bitty cracks that there was a pool there, and he loves water. And at that point in time, he had no sense of fear, whereas now he's scared of everything, and thank God for it. But at that time, he was not. And they didn't have their front door locked. So he figured out, that little booger, how to get out of that gate. He went in their front door like he lived there. That was his house. He went running through, took his underoos off somewhere during the course of his going through that person's house. So just imagine his little booty, just naked as a jaybird. This little dude running, and he jumped right into the pool. And the neighbors, thank the Lord, they were having a pool party because they could have been bad. Like, imagine if they weren't around and they left their door open and he went running. And so anyways, bad parent moment. We saw it happen, but Wimberly was a newborn at this time, and I was feeding her, and my husband was on the toilet.
Surprise, surprise.
That Caldwell colon. He was on the toilet. So I remember I had to quickly put Wimberly down in her little napper, and I went bolting to grab my naked, very wet 4-year-old son from the pool. So yes, he won't do that now because he's super scared. But yeah, he gave me a heart attack. I'm pretty sure I aged at least 10 years that day.
I can just imagine the people in the pool looking up and this little naked 4-year-old comes running.
Oh my goodness. They probably thought we were the worst parents. And you know what? We probably, in that moment, I think everyone's had that bad parent moment, but oh my gosh, I felt like the worst parent. That was awful, but he's okay now. He's lived to see the day we can go play in water and splash around and do it safely. So thank God for that.
Yes. So you mentioned how he is with his sisters. What's their relationship like in relation to him and in relation to you? Like, did they feel resentful? I mean, I know they're little, they can't really probably articulate that, but do they feel like he's getting more attention?
I could see where they probably could think that at times, because sometimes you do have to give him a little more attention. But I will say he's got a very strong-willed girl flanking either side of him. So first off, he doesn't need to talk ever in life if he doesn't want to, because trust me, Janie and Wimberly will do all the talking for him. That they do that. She'll look at him and she'll read his face. She goes, "Oh, well, Bubby feels this way," or "Bubby wants this." Like she will literally, and he'll just look up at her and he'll just wait for her to like let us know what he's thinking or feeling because she communicates for him. Janie is very much the loving, silent protector, meaning she's not as verbal, like, "Oh, come here, Bubby, I love you," and she'll coddle him. Then you have Wimberly, who, if he does something wrong, she'll be the first one to smack his butt. And she's only 3, mind you. She'll give him a spanking. She'll tattle on him. "Oh, Bubby, you don't do that." But they love them. They love him very, very much. They're very protective over him. Wimberly is probably the closest to him, and I think he probably gets on his nerves the most. But that little stinker loves her brother. I mean, since they were itty bitty, she wants to curl up and nap with him, and she wants to go and do what Bubby does, and she makes sure Bubby's included. And I remember it's probably been a couple years, or I'd say probably Wimberly was probably close to about a year, and Chad and I were having a conversation. These tough conversations every parent has to have of preparing the life without us, working on that will, and who do they go to if something happens and we're both in an accident or and then we have the conversation of Corbin. We don't know what things are going to look like for him down the line, but I fully anticipate Corbin will forever be home.
Mm-hmm.
We will more than likely never be empty nesters. That won't happen. We will always have Bubba. So when we talk about our retirement plan and what we're going to do, it's what the 3 of us are going to do, and the girls can join us if they want, right? And I remember, Chad, who is not as you know, he is not an emotional being. He's not a crier, but he got choked up and he said, "Man, Jessi, what are we going to do one day if we die and we leave him? Who's going to take care of him?" And Janie, I didn't even know, was listening to this conversation. And she was playing. She just stopped what she was doing. She turned around. She walked over to Chad and she said, "Daddy, I'll take care of him."
Aw.
And he lost it. And I lost it. And she's like, "You guys are weird." And then she turns around and she walks away. Like, "Why are you crying?" But that in and of itself really spoke to their dynamic. And sometimes I know she might feel, and we've had these conversations with her, it might feel like Bubby gets more attention, but Bubby needs more attention because of these reasons. But we also are very cognizant to have what we call girl time, where it's just Mommy and Janie, or Mommy, Janie, and Wimberly. And, Chad will try to have, he'll play video games and do dad things with her. So we make it a point for them to have one-on-one time with each of us, so they don't feel like Bubby gets all the attention and we're just kind of here. Now that we've gotten a little bit better with that as they are getting older, especially with Janie and doing things that she likes and getting involved in it a little bit more. They do piano and, what she likes to be girly, but she also likes to play video games and do sports and stuff. So I don't ever see any animosity. I think every sibling gets annoyed. They fight like cats and dogs. They'll get annoyed just with one another, like every sibling does. I'm sure, obviously, John Hayden and Juliet probably want to strangle each other 9 times out of 10, but they love each other, right? That's their sibling. And that's the same thing with these 3. I think the girls are probably more so protective than I would have thought they'd be. So, for example, Janie recently she wanted to do a pageant, which is shocking because she's my introvert. But she said, "Mommy, I want to do a pageant." So I said, "Okay, cool, let's do it." And they had, she was practicing her questions, because in the little junior miss division, they had you got the questions in advance so they can work on it. And one of the questions was, who do you admire most and why? And we're practicing, we're going through and I just want her to give me her answer from her heart. And then, we can help her tweak the verbiage as needed. And of course, Chad goes, well, we all know it's going to be me. And I didn't say anything. I just giggled. And then that little stinker goes, Corbin is who I admire most. He doesn't communicate like me and you, and he lives in a world where nobody understands him. And that is so brave. And of course, I'm a crier, as we're all very well aware of by now. I started crying, and I realized in that moment that even though she's 8 and she's only 12 and a half months older than him, man, that kid is smart and she gets it. And that is sadly more than I can say for some adults. But I know if the Lord calls me home before Corbin, I got 2 very strong girls that will love that boy and take care of him to no end. So that is very comforting to know that. And they're only 8 and 3. So don't worry, I got plenty more times to cry and more examples as they get older, but they're close and they love him very much. So I'm thankful.
I was listening to an interview with somebody who it's Rosie O'Donnell. I know pretty much nobody likes her now, but she does have it's weird to bring her up.
I think she's funny.
She's not really in the spotlight anymore. But she was on the Kelly Clarkson show, and she said that, she has 5 kids, and the 4 she adopted kind of right after each other. But the 5th one, she kind of adopted late in life. She's only 8. She's way younger than all the other ones. And so it's just kind of her and that 8-year-old at home now. And she has autism, the little girl does. And she was just saying that when she first realized she had autism, she was like, there's no manual for this. Like, I don't know, this is completely different than any parenting I've ever done before. But she was like, I cannot imagine life without her now. And she was like, she has taught me so much that I never thought I would needed to know any, but she's just taught me so much about life. So my question, it's twofold. Number 1, what has Corbin taught you about life? Yeah. And number 2, what's your advice to parents who maybe have that 18-month-old that are kind of starting that journey of like, okay, I think we might have some challenges, some issues here that we need to work through. So what's your advice for them? And then also, what has Corbin taught you?
Yeah. So that is a huge one. What he's taught me is, and I say this and I mean it to my core, is in all of my time as an adult on this earth, I have learned to communicate prolifically and from your heart way more with Corbin than I could have ever done going to college and having a career. Like, he has taught me the very epitome of communication, of love, being understanding, and I think really accepting people and meeting them where they're at, not always trying to fix them. I think that is an innate ability that a lot of women have, especially moms. We want to fix things. I want to make it better. And, this isn't something that you make better. It's not something that you fix. You learn to love him for what he is and how he is, and you kind of adapt to them. It's the whole thing of make him normal. Like, I wouldn't want him any other way. And I know some people are like, oh, I would, but he's Corbin. That's what makes him him. So I've learned acceptance, and I've learned that life is not always going to pan out the way that you have envisioned it, growing up, thinking you're going to get married and have all these kids and that they're going to be fine. And no, like life isn't like that. But that sweet little dude, he might never contribute to, the GDP, and he might never do anything like you and I do, right? He might not go out there in that work world and do quote unquote normal, but what he is going to do is he is going to make this world a better place because of his smile and his love and his infectious little grin and dimples. And I'm a better person because I get to be his mom. And I know that sounds super cheesy, but that kid, you spend some time with them and he could be a lot. He can have his moments where he could be just exhausting. But I tell you, all my kids love me. But I always joke and tell Chad, nobody loves me the way Corbin loves me. Like he'll come in he'll search me out. I'll be on a call and he gets off the bus and he'll come hunt me down in the home office just to give me a hug and a kiss. And then he scurries on his way. Advice for those parents who might have been, me back in 2017 with a little 18-month-old that you just weren't hitting those milestones. Talk to your pediatrician. That was our first course of action, is have those conversations with them. And then that's when we found out that there were, birth to 3 or early intervention programs out there available to you. So it doesn't matter how much money you make or if you have amazing insurance or you have terrible insurance, if you're a 6-figure income or you're barely 4-figure income, whatever the case may be, they're out there to help you. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Just ask questions. Learn about the waivers in your states. That's a huge one. What is out there that you can take a hold of? Because again, you can have that, 6-figure job and a really good insurance, but when you start adding in all these therapies and medicines, and it adds up. And then it also is important to have a community that, parents that get you. And unfortunately, if you're in a smaller place like I am right now in West Virginia, you don't really have that community physically. So sometimes you have to find those other parents out there that are like you, maybe in a Facebook group or someplace. Find folks that go through their similar things that you do and ask them questions and find out what works for them and where do they go to the doctor and what was their therapy. And so ask questions, be curious. And if somebody tells you something and it just doesn't feel right to your gut, don't listen to them. Keep fighting for your kid because you're the only one that can advocate for them because they can't advocate for themselves. And sometimes doctors can be wrong.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I enjoyed it. It was so nice to have an hour-long adult conversation with you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks for joining us today on This Is My Story. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. This has been Jessi's story. What's yours?